Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and we're going to talk about servant leadership. The speaker the first hour gave a great introduction about servant leadership. Everything he was talking about had to do with servant leadership. I don't know that he'd call it that, but I'm going to share a little bit with you about my experience in Wisconsin. I always called us Baraboobians. I lived in Baraboo, Wisconsin for 12 and a half years. It was 1991. I was 4 years old. No, just kidding. 1991, when this Virginia boy, now living in North Carolina, got a call from a headhunter about a company called Flambeau Corporation in Baraboo, Wisconsin. They're a plastics company. At the time, they were doing $25 million in sales, something like that. I was in sales and marketing with a company in North Carolina. My wife's from Atlanta. My 9-year-old and 7-year-old sons, born and living in North Carolina. So you can imagine when we started telling our friends and our parents, 9 and 7, you don't know a lot. I showed them pictures of Wisconsin Dells. They thought we were moving to Disneyland. They were excited and happy, so they didn't care. But my wife, it was kind of a weird thing. There was a lot of discussion. I'd use the word arguing, but that's not. Servant leaders don't argue, we discuss. And to make a long story short, we felt like the good Lord wanted us to move to Wisconsin. And then that's what it came down to. A lot of prayer, a lot of thought, a lot of tears. And we moved to Wisconsin, and I can remember I interviewed for the job during January and February. So that tells you how crazy a Southerner I am. I remember landing at the Madison airport. And I had to go outside to get the rental car. I don't know if you still do or not and all that stuff, but I started feeling this sensation in my nose that I'd never felt before. And it was that frozen nose hair thing that was going on. In the South, we didn't have that. I had a lot of firsts moving to Wisconsin. I can remember, and part of the interview process, which I didn't know at the time, was to have me drive in this snowstorm from the airport to Baraboo to see if I could get there. Was this crazy Southerner going to be able to drive in the snow, not have a car wreck, get liability issues going and all that? So I made it. I grew up in the mountains of Virginia, so I had driven in snow many times. So that worked. Another first for me was I was told to be a man in Wisconsin, you had to go deer hunting. Well, in the South, we did a lot of bird hunting, a lot of quail, dove hunting. So I had a 12-gauge double-barrel shotgun. That wasn't going to work for deer hunting, so luckily, I didn't have to buy one. I got to borrow one. And so I hadn't figured out the deer hunting yet. I bought some clothes, and, I didn't buy the right clothes. My feet were freezing in about 45 minutes. In a tree stand. What's up with climbing into a tree to go hunting? I hadn't figured that one out yet. So finally, I get tired. My feet are cold. I'm walking around. I turn around, hear something. I see a deer. I shoot it. I'm excited. I get over there and see this poor deer, and his eyes are open, his tongue's hanging out, and I'm going, why did I kill this deer? Then I knew I shouldn't have killed the deer when Larry, who worked for me and took me hunting on his property, says, Bill, I can't get the pickup truck down here. So we're going to have to drag that deer up that hill. Well, the hill looked like it was 40 miles long. It was only probably a quarter of a mile, but I'm lucky I didn't have a heart attack trying to pull this deer, because he wanted to make a big deal. I'm a Southerner. It's my first year. It was November. And he just wanted to have some fun with me to see if I was a manly man kind of thing. Another first. In the South, we eat skinny hot dogs. We call them chili dogs, slaw dogs. I don't know if you ever had a slaw dog where you put coleslaw on your hot dog. Well, some friends invited us over and said, we're going to have some sausages. And I'm thinking, well, in the South, we eat sausage for breakfast, or either put it in gravy on our biscuits. And so I'm thinking, what are we going to be doing with sausages for dinner? We walk in, I see them taking these long, weird-looking hot dogs, as I'd call them, but they were brats, dropped them in the water. They were Johnsonville brats, and they were fantastic. But as I watched them drop them into boiling water and then pour a beer in there, I'm going, Wisconsin people will do anything to drink a beer. And so, my wife's looking at me and she's going, do we eat this thing? I said, yeah, well, they're going to put it on a grill, so that'll kill most of whatever's in there. So Ended up eating the brats, loved it. In the South, we didn't have Johnsonville brats back in the 80s and 90s. Now you can find them all in the store, so Johnsonville's done a good job, and I like them better than slaw dogs now, so that's good. Another first, and this will be the last one, then we're going to get into servant leadership. My wife came running in, I think it was January, about 95 or 96. She said, I just heard on the TV that we have got to get on the roof and shovel our snow. If we don't, our roof's going to collapse. And I said, who told you that? She said, it was on TV. So, you know, our kids, they loved it. The kids loved getting able to get up on the roof and shovel snow. We throw the ladders. We're up there. We noticed nobody else in our neighborhood is shoveling snow. Then I noticed they start coming out with their hands. They got a beer in their hand, and they're watching, and they're pointing. I said, we're the entertainment. I said, this must be a thing that Wisconsin does for, they know people are going to move every year, or people are going to come from the South. Not many people come from the South to Wisconsin, but some, or you move from other places. And so we figured out, they just announced that so there's some entertainment for the people in the neighborhood to watch the stupid Southerners get up on the roof and shovel snow. But we had a good time. Wisconsin was a great place to raise a family. My sons were 9 and 7. They ended up going, one went to Whitewater, one went to Oshkosh. They're 30 years old and 28 years old. If you ever went there, you maybe knew them. If you graduated in 2004 from either one of those. One was 2004, one was 2006 graduate. My oldest son met his wife at Baraboo High School, dated all through high school, all through college, 2 years after. And the good Lord worked it out that these Wisconsin crazy people now are in Indiana. That son with the grandchildren is 25 minutes from our house. And you talking about awesome. I've been president of companies. I've been vice president of companies. My favorite title is Pop Pops. That's what I love now, to hear, had that 4.5-year-old hug my neck. Let's talk about servant leadership. I put competitive advantage in there because I was hoping business people, you know, you see servant leadership books, but I was hoping that competitive advantage would cause people to pick it up. Because we don't think a lot of times about our people as a competitive advantage. We think about buildings, equipment, strategy, all kinds of things. And servant leadership is a term that most people, it's starting to become more popular. But a lot of times when you hear servant leader, it's used in a church, it's used in a nonprofit organization. When I think of servant leaders, people say, well, what's really a servant leader? I said, think back to Katrina. And the government was saying they couldn't get down to the New Orleans to get to the people. Who got to the people? It was volunteers. It was the Red Cross, the Salvation Army. It was churches. People who are driven because they care about people. A lot about, and this is my assistant? No, just kidding. Do some magic acts later. And so servant leadership, and we're going to talk about it. The term was really coined by Robert Greenleaf in 1970. And he wrote an essay called The Servant Leader. The term servant leader had been around before him. There have been servant leaders since the beginning of time. But it's kind of a new concept for businesses to think about servant leader and what does that look like in this macho world of business that we call it. So let's go to my Vanna White there in the first slide. We couldn't get the little clicker to work. 38 years in business, working in manufacturing. And one thing that I quickly learned is that everything rises or falls on leadership. They are the who, the what, and the where. He was talking about influence. Every leader has influence. Some it's very positive, some it's very negative. Some leaders have a little bit of both, depending on the situation, depending on the people they're working with. They may have favorite people that they want to really care about, and then the others they don't care anything about. Servant leadership is something that you have to learn to become. Because servant leadership really means that you are putting other people first, and we're all born selfish. I watch my 4.5-year-old and 2.5-year-old grandsons fight over toys. Nobody taught them to fight over toys. It was natural. One would be in this corner of the room, one in that corner in the room. And they're just happy as they can be, and then one notices that the other has picked up one of their toys. And then they do that famous, they throw themselves on the ground and they're crying, and we pick them up and tell them, you know, you're supposed to share, you're supposed to love, and they look at us like, what is he talking about? But 2.5 minutes later, they're fine again. But in business, sometimes when those kind of events happen, I call those selfish moments, it's not okay a lot of times. It ruins relationships within a business. It ruins the impact that a leader can have on their people. So always think about everything rises and falls on leadership. You can go to the next slide. I put together, these are the things that, I was president of 2 companies. I started my own company 2 years ago. When you get gray hair and you get to be 62 years old, I know I look 35, but when you're 62 and you've been in business 38 years and you got gray hair, you become a consultant. I felt that was kind of my calling, to share what I'd learned, the good, the bad, the struggles. Then I got this wild idea to write a book and try to share that. So I share my journey, I share my struggles, my successes, but most importantly, how do you implement servant leadership? A lot of the times when I talk with people, they go, well, servant leadership sounds really great, but how do you really implement this in a business? What do you do? How do you start? Well, first, I always start with, I have a company tell me their problems and issues and challenges. These are the ones that I have uttered from my mouth, and these are the ones when I talk with clients today that I hear. The first one is China. You can click that, because, yeah. My son does some of this stuff. He likes this these young people like that fancy stuff. I'd have just had them up there and wanted to put an X and circle around it. But anyway, most businesses, China isn't their problem, but we like to blame China. Now, I just heard the other day when GE announced their earnings that they're going to bring back some of the appliance manufacturing to the United States. The reason for that is natural gas and oil is, even though natural gas isn't expensive, but oil is here, it's a lot more expensive in China. The labor rates are going up 10% a year in China, and so lots of businesses are starting to really relook at that. But in spite of that, China is not the problem at most companies. Competitors. You want to click? Okay, competitors. Competitors, we like to blame our competitors. They're selling at lower prices, they're messing up the market, they got better salespeople, they got newer equipment, they got better buildings. It's really not competitors. You can click the next one. These really go together. Can't find good people and people are lazy. How many of you have heard that in your company? Yeah, I mean, it's a good excuse. And really, when I hear people say that, especially when I have a client now that has 45% turnover, I'll give you that 10% let's just say that 10% of the people who come to work, for whatever reason, maybe the way they were raised, they have some kind of dysfunction, they maybe have a learning disability, and maybe they just can't get it. But when you have 45% and 30% kinds of turnover, it's not the people. It's the process you have for assimilating people into your workplace. When I was president when I became president later of Flambeau, we had 10 manufacturing facilities. And I had a lady, I did town meetings. I stole it from Jack Welch. It's one of the things that helped me become a servant leader, because I learned that people have so much to give, but we as leaders don't talk. We don't ask. We don't spend time. He was talking about that this morning. And I had a town meeting. This lady raised her hand and she says, do you know how horrible it is to work here? And when you're doing a town meeting, that's not one of the questions you want to hear. So she said, do you know how horrible it is to work here? And I said, ma'am, I don't. Southern. My mother taught me to say, yes, ma'am. And I said, ma'am, I don't. Why don't you help me try to understand? She said, I started here a week ago. Said the HR department did a really good job of going over the policies and the issues and if I need help, where the bathrooms are, all those kind of things. And then they took me out on the plant floor. I met the supervisor and I met the team leader. They took me over to a blow molding machine, which is a plastic machine that makes parts, bottles and things. Said, this machine costs $500,000. Don't break it. So that was the first word she heard. Then they showed me how to do a pack out. They had a picture of a good part, a bad part, had even a sample of a good and bad part. Spent 10, 15 minutes with me. She said, I have spent the rest of the week trying to get their attention because I have lots of questions. She goes, because I'm new, nobody's really talking to me. I eat lunch by myself. I had to kind of figure out things. She says, it is miserable for me. That's when kind of some of the lights started coming on, and I said, well, okay, what can we do? Let's start a buddy program. And somebody starts work here. I want somebody assigned with them that they're going to eat lunch with them every day and they're going to spend time with them. I want the supervisor to have a little, and this sounds elementary. This was in 98. lot of different things today than what we were doing in '98. But I said, I just want a little clipboard at the machine, each machine, and I want the supervisor and the team leader, when they stop at that machine and talk, it's kind of like when you go into the reception area at a business. You write down the time you showed up and the time you left. I said, I want them to write down when they stopped at a machine, what time they got there, and when they left. And if there was any big issues, I want to get a weekly report or a monthly report, depending on the plant and the issues that we might be having. And I want to understand what's going on. What are the questions in people? I want you all to start holding town meetings not just when I come once a quarter. It seemed to help. It's about time. It's about people. Servant leadership isn't this mysterious thing. Knowing your issues and challenges. When I meet with companies, they can just lay out all their issues and struggles and the barriers to getting things. They may not know exactly how to fix them, but they know what they are. The big problem, I was sharing with someone earlier, people will say, what does a consultant do? You know, I get the joke that, you know what, the first time I called in this gentleman, he's now a client, he goes, you know what a consultant is? I said, no, what? He goes, a consultant is somebody that asks you what time it is and then they steal your watch. And I'm going, well, that doesn't sound real good. So I said, no, do you know what a consultant does? And he said, what's a consultant do? I said, a consultant helps you do what you already know you need to do. You're not doing it. We're kind of a coach. We're kind of help point out things. Maybe we have a skill set that you need in your company, especially if you're a smaller company. And so that's what I do. And I usually start with the people that work in the cubicles or on the manufacturing floor. And it drives the leaders crazy. Why do you want to start there? And I said, because those are the people who know what's going on. They might not have a clear picture of it, but they know. You just have to listen. You know, I get that stuff, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I go, I've been doing this for 40 years. I know a little bit, may not know it all. So you can go to the next one, and then the next one. Here's what I believe are the biggest problems in a business. The first is lack of trained leaders to understand the real role of leadership. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. It's when the light came on in my head. If you leave here with anything, I want you to realize that your job as a leader is to impact the lives of the people that God puts in your path, and that's to help them discover their purpose and their potential and reach that potential. It's about the people that are in your path each and every day. Your family, your children, your wife, your husband. Sometimes that's the hardest part. The hardest job of being a leader is to lead yourself. I think of many mistakes that I made in my life because I was a lousy leader over myself. Luckily, if you live long enough, you can correct some of those things. And my youngest son, bless his heart, has picked up some of his dad's bad habits when I was 28 years old. And my wife always says, you're being paid back for when you were 28 years old. So lack of trained leaders. I have met, in 40 years, I could count on one hand what I would call the bad, evil leaders in a company. But I have met many leaders who are leading poorly because we're not providing training. Most people are promoted because you're good at a skill. My first promotion was at age 28. I was promoted from being a salesman to a regional sales manager. I got the job just because I was a good salesman. I had no idea what a leader did. I had 3 people now that were reporting to me, and I'm worrying about my bonus, my incentives, my title, how I'm going to look. I really wasn't caring about them. I was a very selfish leader when I first started out. So the real problem is we think 2 days a year is enough to train a leader to lead people and to get continuous improvement every year, or 4 days a year. What would happen at the Badgers if the football team shows up for spring practice or fall practice? And the coach says, you know, we're very busy this year. We got to look at game films of the people we're going to be the teams that we're going to be playing this year. Plus, we're going to be recruiting people who are coming in to try to replace you next year. They're seniors in high school. We don't have time. Here's the playbook. It's everything you need. It's beautiful. It's got plays. I want you to learn them. You all figure out when to practice, and I want you to just show up on Saturdays, and we're going to go 12-0 and go to a bowl game. And yet, that's what we tell leaders when we promote you. I think you're good enough. I don't think we really have to spend any time for you to get better. Here's the playbook. Read a bunch of leadership books. We're going to get together 2 days a year, and you're going to be doing fantastic. We're going to increase sales, we're going to increase profits, and everybody's going to be happy. And then we wonder why leaders are unhappy. I talk about that, I think, on here somewhere or the next one. Lack of gold standard for the right kind of leader. There's principle-based leadership. You can call it servant leadership. It's all based on about the people that you're called to lead. It's not about self. As a leader, it's always about the person you're leading, not about yourself. It's kind of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How do you want to be treated as a person? And so most companies, when I say, what do you want your leaders to do? Here's the first thing I hear. I want them to grow sales and increase profits. I want to see continuous improvement every year. I want cost reduced. All of those things are important. You got to have profits. You got to have sales. Your company has to grow. You have to hire people. You have to pay taxes, or all this whole system we've got falls apart. But thousands of interactions take place between leaders and people, between the top line and the bottom line in every company. Every day. That either moves, as he was talking about, either makes deposits in the banks of life or takes withdrawals. So I like to be able to put a name on it so that where are we headed as a leader? You're going to become a servant leader. So you put a name on it, you teach people what that's about, and training and teaching are two different things. Training is about imparting information, teaching is about bringing about change and transformation. Too many companies do training because they want to check off, especially in manufacturing. I've been there, I know it. Our ISO audit's coming, our lean manufacturing. We got to check off, oh gosh, we hadn't done our training. Let's check this off real quick so we can get our 2 days in and we can get past our audit. And we don't do it to bring about change. We do it to check off something on a form. Lack of helping people who walk through the doors of your business each and every day discover and reach their potential. Again, you're going to see that all through these because that's the way I want you to think about it. Lack of focus, time and effort on the right things, and lack of real accountability for the results. If all you're focusing on is profit, you'll never achieve the profit that you wanted to achieve. Because of those thousands of interactions that take place. The people who actually do the work. Businesses get so focused, leaders that I can remember myself sitting at my desk in piles of paper and I'm overwhelmed and I realize I haven't probably talked with anybody at corporate or talked to a plant manager in maybe 30 days and I'm going, that's not what I'm called to do. The trouble today is leaders are also managers. I'm in one of the groups on LinkedIn and I always I laugh when they go, what's the difference in a manager and a leader? And there's all kinds of great definitions, but we're both. There's nobody that's just paid to walk around and be nice to people all day. Because you got lots of stuff you got to get done. But if you stop focusing on task and focus on the people that do the task, I can assure you, you will get your task done faster. They will be better. Because you need to concentrate on if the Badgers concentrated only on the playbook instead of the players, instead of making sure that they had the right diet, they're getting the right weight room training, all the things that go into making a great team, they wouldn't win many ball games if it's all about the playbook instead of about the players. You can click it to the next one. So why do we need the servant leadership model? How many of you don't believe leadership is in crisis around the world today? How many of you are happy with Congress? I'm going to send this video to them after that. No, just kidding. Leadership, you've got people in Syria and Libya and Egypt who are willing to die in the streets because of the power model of leadership. Carry the big stick. I'm the leader. You do as I say, and I'll treat you any way I want to. If you don't like it, well, if you're in a country, you got to move. But in a company, I guess you can quit or get fired. And leadership's in crisis, and I think for me, servant leadership is probably one of the answers. The power model of leadership isn't the model. It's not working. Selfish style of leadership. If I look at Congress, it's a hodgepodge of both. It doesn't matter whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. They can't get along. Servant leaders would never take their arguments in public. They would talk in private. Conflict is something that happens in business. It's part of what leaders do. But you're paid to resolve conflict. Work through it, and then everybody get on the team and go for it. They want to get out in front of the cameras real quickly so that they can talk about how bad the other team members, supposedly, of Congress are. And so they'll never have a sense of team. A gap is developing between leaders and the people they're called to lead. Leaders are feeling frustrated and stressed. and the people have lost trust and respect for their people or for their leaders. Most companies that I work with today, and I can think back to the many town meetings, it all resolved around there was this gap that was growing. Because leaders aren't focusing on the people. People know they want somebody, all the things we talked about in the other room there, to acknowledge me, to appreciate me. If I'm not doing my job, explain to me what I need to do better. Don't hold a review once a year, and I did. What is it to sit down for 30 minutes to an hour with a person and say, I really care about you. Let's just quickly do your review. Thank you. I'll see you next year. And we wonder why people don't understand what's going on or why they need to do better. And then somebody walks in their office and fires them. And they go, I didn't know this was going to happen. I spoke to the MBA class at Butler University beginning of the month. And these were people all 25 to 35, kind of like many of you. And they were just rapid firing asking me questions. They said, well, as a servant leader, have you ever had to fire anybody? I said, yes, I did. I don't call it firing. I just call them helping them find a career somewhere else. And he said, well, how do you do it? Is it tough? I said, there's never been anybody that I've let go that reported to me that didn't know it was coming, because I've had many meetings with them. We set a 30 and a 60 and a 90-day goal. And I'd personally go back and use, these were usually vice presidents or plant managers or whatever it may be. But there was no surprise. And he said, what's the toughest firing you ever had to make? I'll tell you a crazy one. I lived in Baraboo. I hadn't been president long. A guy that had been in my golf foursome, he was an engineering manager. He'd been in my golf foursome when I wasn't VP of sales anymore. I was executive vice president. It was my test to see if I could be president. And so I ended up, he'd been in my foursome for a while. He was not getting along with people. He was doing a terrible job of leading his people. I had 4 meetings with him. My foursome became a threesome because I had to let this guy go. People go, wow, that is tough. It was tough for me. If you ever get to the point where letting people go is fun, you're not a leader. I had to shut a plant down once, 180 people. And they said, Bill, you don't want to go down there and make the announcement. I said, I'm going to make the announcement. We as leaders caused this problem. They didn't. So we went and made it. I wept with them. And I get calls and cards from many of them today because I just took the time to show them that I cared. I didn't do it in an email, I didn't do it in a memo, and I didn't send somebody else to do it. I wanted to look them in the face when I gave them the bad news. I wanted to feel it so that the next time we were having trouble at a plant, maybe we could figure out how to fix it instead of having to let people go. The workforce is losing trust. So the 2 groups of people in business that we call to come together to make it work, the leaders and the workforce, there's this gap. A lot of leaders are frustrated because they thought, I remember when I got promoted, I was going, this is awesome. Now when my boss comes in here and tells me I'm doing a lousy job, I've got some people I can go pick on. I can go kick some butt, kind of. And luckily, during my career, I learned that wasn't the fun part. Most leaders are stressed and frustrated because they're not being able to lead the way they want to because nobody's training them. And so lack of training, lack of the right model for them to aspire to become. And so lots of leaders sit at their desk, not because they really don't like people. They're afraid, they haven't been trained, and they're afraid somebody's going to ask them a question, or they're going to have to look somebody in the face and give them a tough message, and they don't know how. So we've done a disservice to people who could become great leaders by not training them and not helping them understand what leadership is about. And then servant leaders understand that lasting success comes from helping the people discover and reach their potential. Anyway. So servant leaders bring a vision that believes, and in my book there's a long paragraph. I just tried to break it down here. The best strategy to achieve your organizational, create the kind of environment you want and the competitive advantage is developing an environment of caring, mutual trust, and respect between the leaders and the people. And you go, Bill, that really sounds great on a piece of paper. How do you really make that happen? Well, we're going to talk about that. You focus your efforts on developing the full potential of all your associates and the organization and the business. And we're going to talk about that's where most people run into trouble, is how do you do that? And I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. It's like you can lead a horse to the trough, you can't make a horse drink kind of thing. I've got some clients that are embracing servant leadership, and I got some that look at me like I just landed from Mars. But the people in the plant really, when you talk to them about it, they get it. Most of the time it's the leaders, not all the leaders. Therefore, creating a winning partnership, you learn that helping others helps you. If you really want to feel good as a leader, start helping people. It'll bring you the joy and happiness that you really want, that power and titles don't bring you. All we have to look at it, and Tiger Woods and Whitney Houston, all these kind of things are in the news. They're not necessarily leaders. Penn State, lots of things go on. It's selfishness, it's power, it's titles. People with supposedly the biggest homes, the biggest paychecks, the best looking wives and husbands and cars and pools and everything, it's not making them happy. I'll get personal. I think God is, a lot of these things happen, God has opened a window for us to look and see that power and things don't bring happiness. It's a big window. It's in the paper every day, it's on TV every day, and yet people still kind of don't get it. You can get the next one. So how did servant leaders and people discover and reach their potential? Obviously, I wrote a 176-page book. Try to get it done in 45 minutes. Does it, although we start a half an hour, so I don't know if you get extra time or not. Do we get extra time? Take a couple days? Okay. First, you have to learn to care about people. As I said at the beginning, we are born selfish. Learning to care about people is hard. Because we bring our dysfunctions, they bring their dysfunctions, and we say, okay, let's all work together. And that's hard. People, it's a battle to deal with people. It's a battle to be married successfully. It's a battle to raise children. None of it's really easy. And again, I'll go back to the training, or the teaching, as I'd like to call it, instead of training. What do we do to really help people become better leaders? How do we really train and teach the workforce of how to push back in a way that we can work on those things that we need to improve on? Caring about people really starts with spending time with your people, building relationships, and understand their unique personalities, skills, abilities, and goals. When I became president, I quickly understood the problem in spending time. My vice presidents were right there at the corporate headquarters in Baraboo. We had 10 manufacturing plants, 8 in the United States, 1 in Mexico, and 1 in England. And just finding time to spend with people. Then we found ourselves, you start leading with emails. Emails have made leaders lazy. Emails were meant to share some information, not try to resolve conflict or bring about transformation of a company or tell somebody they really need to kick it in gear, and then we copy 1,000 people. I could tell you, I don't know about your president, and some of you who have big leadership roles, but somebody would send an email, and I call it the kissing up time. They're trying to cover themselves so that if this goes bad, I've gotten an email and so have 100 other people. Then you start watching the email battle, and then because I'm copying on it, I end up with 500 emails on one subject. And so I finally called a meeting with all my people, and I said, guys, this has got to stop. And it happened, and I share it in the book. Two of my vice presidents, the typical, one was vice president of manufacturing, one was vice president of sales. And they're like opposites. It's like the Badgers playing Minnesota, or something. And so I watched this go on for an hour, and I called them both in my office, and I wasn't probably a very good servant leader at that moment. And their offices were at least only 20 feet from each other. And they just wanted to email each other. Instead of walking in their office and solving something probably in 20 minutes, they had to get me involved, which wasn't a good thing at that particular point. And it was one of those teachable moments that we all love to have as leaders, where you can really teach and pick on them a little bit at the same time. Lovingly pick on them. Spending time with your people. Plant managers, it doesn't matter whether you're a plant manager, engineering manager, whether you have one person reporting to you or 100. You have to figure out how to spend time. And people go, Bill, I've got 40 people reporting to me. How do I spend time? I said, do you eat lunch every day? They go, yeah. I said, okay, well, how many times is that a month? They go, well, 20. Bring a bag lunch, bring in a pizza, whatever you want to do, but sit down with an individual, a different person at lunch every day. Can you do it every day? No, because sometimes you're traveling, something's come up, you got to run an errand. but spend time with your people. We love to use sports analogies. Can you imagine Badger coaches not spending any time with the players? They don't spend time. They don't find out what their goals and their skill level and their personalities. If you take a football team, basketball team, football, just because there's more players, 90 to 120, whatever it is now, they get so many scholarships or get some taken away. I can't keep up with them. But 90 to 100 and some people on a team. They come from all parts of the country. They have different skill levels, different abilities, different sizes, raised in different homes. And what seems like would be this dysfunction, and what makes it a bigger dysfunction, is they're trying to beat each other out, yet at the same time be a team. They're hitting each other every day and knocking. In my book, I said, well, maybe we need to wear helmets and uniforms to work. Maybe we could have a sense of team. I don't know. But I watch how the great coaches, and there's some that don't do it so great. Badgers seem to do it really well. They're able, in spite of these dysfunctions, to build a sense of team where it's all about we, not I. And that's the other thing about servant leadership. It's always about we, it's not about I. Servant leadership, really any kind of leadership, is never about yourself. It's about the people you've been called to lead. So understand their unique personalities, skills, abilities, talents, and goals. I know leaders who only know their people's first name. They don't know what gets a person excited. They don't know what their goals are. They don't know that Johnny plays soccer, their 8-year-old son, or their daughter plays soccer, or plays piano, or whatever. And you go, well, Bill, I got 40 people. Spend 5 minutes. I remember I used to love to walk through manufacturing plants, and because of my experience and because of watching, I started having our plant managers hold meetings with the people, town meetings. Some were very good, some weren't. We started training them how to do it. They became better. Some couldn't stand it, but they did it anyway. And I watched as the expressions on people's face. In the book, I call it counterfeit servant leader. There are those people who try to be nice, and you know they're really not. And it doesn't play well. He talked about it. But don't ever fake it, because people can pick it up. And when I'm walking through a plant, and I stop at every machine, I say hello to the operator, and you can just watch them. They're over there going. I love to watch the lead, because they're just afraid I'm going to hear something that's going to create work for them. And that's why I walk through, because I want to hear what people think. And then you get to watch people's, when the plant manager or whoever it may be, could be in the cubicles with the engineering, and I'm walking through, and the leader will go, and the plant manager or supervisor will go, "Hey, how you doing?" And you see the people go, they roll their eyes or they make some expression, and you know that this is fake, that this person never really speaks or spends time with this person. And I really got good at that. And people go, "Well, how did you know that?" And I said, "Because I watch faces." We all are very expressive when things are going on, good or bad. Feedback. Servant leaders love feedback, and feedback is two-way. I spent a lot of time, not at first as a leader, but I learned early on in a book I read that it said the more questions you ask as a leader, the smarter you will come to the people. Because they don't want to hear you. Now today I have to stand up and give. If I was meeting with you individually, I'd do very little talking. I'd want to know what's going on in your company. What do you think the struggles are? What needs to be, what kind of learning needs to take place in your organization? And yet, I saw a plant manager. He didn't know I was coming, and I used to do surprise. A lot of people would say, "Don't do that." It was I just wanted to. It was third shift. Presidents don't go in after 11 o'clock. And so I went in. It was in Madison, Georgia, at our plant. I always like to go to Madison, Georgia. I could get barbecue. Y'all don't have good barbecue in Wisconsin. We had good barbecue. And got good brats, but you don't have good barbecue. And I watched the supervisor at a machine, and I noticed he had a piece of paper, and he's checking off, and he spent about 15 minutes. I said, "What were you doing?" He said, "I was holding performance review with this person." I said, "Really?" I said, "So we got all this noise going around. You're standing there slumped over the table. You doing check marks. You talked about 15 minutes, and you're trying to tell this person what they need to work on." I said, "What you did screamed, I don't care about you as a person. This is something I have to do." When I saw that, I changed the way I do performance reviews. Because I can remember times And I feel always sorry for the HR department. The HR department's got this deadline. You got to get these performance reviews done. And us leaders keep them on our desk forever till finally we get about the 5th phone call and they're due. We go, okay, I got to get this done. Bob, come in my office. Bob, you're really doing great. You got any questions for me? No, super. See you next year for your performance review. And that's how they play out in a lot of companies. This is your chance, the positive attitude, the feedback, understanding them and their unique skills, abilities, and that's your opportunity to get to know that person and for you to ask them, how am I doing as a leader? What can I do to help you be better at your job? What would you like to see changed about me? I always start a performance review with, these are the things you are really doing well. Here's the things you need to look at. I never call things a failure, and I've had leaders say, Bill, that's stupid. And I said, well, think about it this way. I watched my 4.5-year-old, he was our first grandson, so, you know, they get all the attention. And I watched him when he started to walk. And I can remember he was like 11 months, and he'd take 2 or 3 steps, and he'd fall over, and nobody was going, you're a failure. We're all going, awesome, he's learning to work. That's fantastic. Go, Will. Then he'd grab a hold of the coffee table like the next couple of days, and he'd learn he could walk around the coffee table. And then that day he walked across the room. We don't call that a failure. We call that trying, learning. And lots of things that happen in a business aren't about failure. They're about trying new things, being innovative. If you cut off failure in your business, you won't have a lot of innovation. People will be scared to step out, be scared to take a chance, be scared to try something new. You want your people. Now, you don't want people jumping off the roof. You don't want people bringing guns and going deer hunting in the plant. So there are some things but you want people to feel like this is an open environment for us to try new things and get better. I think lean manufacturing is the greatest tool for a servant leader. It forces a company to kind of be part of it if it's done right, where people come together, bring their ideas, their brain power instead of just their hands, be part of something bigger than they ever thought possible, and then bring about improvement. Servant leaders love lean manufacturing. I have a person that works with me in my firm that when we go in with companies, even if they're doing lean manufacturing, we like to understand what are they doing, because there's all kinds of stages of lean and there's all kinds of quality of lean. Some people are just playing at it to say, so the president can brag at the country club that they're doing lean manufacturing. And some is real. Encourage, motivate, and delegate. Those are things that I think most leaders need to be taught and what that looks like. Some people are natural at it. Some people aren't. Soft skill training and teaching is something that's lacking in most businesses. We play at it at the kind of the surface. We don't really dig into it. We don't role play like we did in there. Role playing is probably one of the most important things in teaching leadership. And it's hard. You don't, in there you don't know the person. You got to look them in the face. Make sure I got the spinach out of my teeth from last night, kind of thing. And I didn't. You can look at this body and tell I don't eat a lot of spinach. But then build trust and respect. So if you learn to care, and you have to learn. If you spend time, if you build relationships, if you really get to know your people, all of you as leaders will have favorite people, but never treat that favorite person better. The favorite person may be better because they're a better student, they've learned more. Maybe they have better capabilities at that point in their life. But don't show favoritism. Feedback, positive attitude, encourage, motivate, delegate, build trust and respect. That's how you build trust and respect. He used the phrase that we all know, that people don't care what you know, that they know that you care. That's so true. And I watch my grandchildren, and how do you show a child you care? You spend time with them. Now, I don't say that you pick them up and kiss them and hug them. Your grandchildren you can, but not probably the people at work. It might get a lawsuit if you do a lot of hugging and kissing and picking up. So I wouldn't advise that. But spend time. People want to know you care. That doesn't mean you hang out together on the weekends. Maybe you do. Doesn't mean you have to go out after work and party together. Maybe you do. I can remember when I first went to Flambeau. We have different terms in the South. And my secretary, bless her heart, I learned one thing about Wisconsin. You know how to drink a lot. And you hold it well. But I walk in the South, I think you all call it pop up here or something. So in the South, we call a soft drink just a drink. It was like 3 in the afternoon. It was my second day, and I said, where can I get a drink? She goes, we don't drink during work, but at 5 o'clock, we'll show you how to drink. I said, I'm in trouble. So I had to learn to say Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi or whatever it was going to be. Set goals, objectives, and priorities, accountability. What do you want your people to become? What do you want them to do? I talk to people in a plant floor or people that aren't leaders, and I said, what are you supposed to do? I'm just supposed to make parts and put them in this box. And I'm thinking, gosh, we've done a poor job of helping them understand. Flambeau made all kinds of Duncan yo-yos, that was their big thing, fishing tackle boxes, duck and deer decoys, and then all kinds of, most people don't know, a huge industrial molding of blow molding, injection molding that goes to automotive, John Deere, Caterpillar, lots of companies. And we came up with this novel idea. We stalled it. Start showing pictures of what these little parts go on. Think about a medical part that you're making, that thing better be right or somebody could die in an operating room. Help people understand what it is they're really doing, other than making this little part that goes in a box and it's supposed to look like those pictures on the machine. Accountability. That's for everybody in a company, leaders especially. I think every company should have the 360 degree where every year your leaders are graded, so to speak, by the people that report to them. I think turnover. I watch people and they go, well, our turnover is 20%. I said, is that company-wide? Yeah. I said, how about third shift, second shift, first shift? Which supervisor? You need to break it down so you can, not to go pick on a leader, but to say, what is the thing I can help you with? What do you need to improve on? We see turnover is a lot higher on your shift. Why do you think that is? Make them part of the solution. They may say, because one of the things we've done is a poor job of helping leaders raise their hand and say, I need help. Because if they've been taught if they raise their hand that they need help, it means they're going to get fired, or people never get promoted again because people are going to think they're weak. The greatest leaders are always wanting feedback. And if your leader isn't giving you feedback, go in his office or her office, say, how am I doing? We haven't talked in a year. How am I doing? You can go to the next one. Servant leaders believe in treating people as the most important asset in the company. I can remember when websites were becoming popular in the early and mid-90s. We said, what do we put on that stuff? Well, you got to have a value statement, a mission statement, principles, values. Okay, people are our most important asset. That sounds awesome. Let's put it on our website. And the people are in the plan of reading that and they're going, where do they work? I mean, who is this people that are their most important? It must be a different plant. It's not here. They are your most important asset. Nothing gets done until people do something. And nothing really gets done until people communicate and build relationships. Most of the businesses in this country never achieve. You know, presidents have a vision, and then there's the results. And there's this gap, and it's because of the way we lead. It's the way we interact with our people. We don't see people as potential, we see people as problems. We see people as lazy. I asked this president of a company, I said, so you're just telling me that all your people are lazy? He says, yeah. And I said, well, do you train? I'm not going to train. They're all going to quit in 60 days. And I go, okay, you're getting what you deserve. And he looked at me like, I mean, if you're not training, what's the expectations? What are they working towards? Are your leaders trained? No, they can't afford it. And I go, you can't afford not to. And he goes, you just want to sell me training. I said, no, hire somebody else. I don't care, but you're never going to close the gap on your vision and the results you're getting if that's your attitude. People come to work bringing their unique personalities, dreams, goals, skills, and hunger for achieving something bigger than themselves. Dysfunctional football team all come with different skill sets. They want to beat the other one out. They're hitting each other every day, but yet they build this sense of team. We were created to have relationships. We weren't meant to do life alone. And somehow we've taken this thing called work and business and created this. And as individuals, we like to create compartments for our life. You know, I got my compartment for my family. I've got 6 buddies that we go to Myrtle Beach every year to play golf. Kay goes, you got that compartment for your buddies from Myrtle Beach. You all go down there and act like you're 18, don't you? And I go, no. So we've taken this compartment of our workplace and says, relationships aren't really important. They're for outside of work. Sense of community, that sounds sissy. We need to have this hard place where people keep their heads down, and if we want them to give us an idea, we'll ask them. And work is where you spend more of your time awake than any other place. And yet we treat it as this strange, mystical place. And it needs to be probably where more relationships are built in businesses. Again, you don't have to hang out after work. You just need to find how do you come together like a football team who's beating each other up, who's trying to beat each other out for the job. And yet the coaches, through servant leadership principles, lots of them. Are some of the coaches servant leaders? Probably not. But they're using a lot of principles and motivation that are driven by servant leadership of how to bring a team together. And it's lots of expectations, lots of accountability. Lots of people will say when they hear the term servant leader, it sounds like a wimp. It's an oxymoron, servant and leader. It's kind of like jumbo shrimp. You know, it's an oxymoron. And servant leaders are far from being wimps because they pour their lives into people. They step out there. They're willing to get hurt because they may try to create a relationship that falls apart or people don't get it. But they know it's about we, not I. People don't come to produce bad products or services or have a bad day. I'll say 10%, and I think that's high. What happens is we don't figure out how to assimilate, nurture, motivate, encourage people to find their potential. And that falls at the feet of leadership. I don't think people get up in the morning and shave when they look in the mirror or put their makeup. Hope you're not both shaving and putting on your makeup. But you're not looking in the mirror going, I hope I have a terrible day today. I'm going to make some bad parts. I'm going to talk to a customer so bad that they hang up and call the president. I want to get fired. Maybe there's 2 or 3, but there's not many. And yet that's how we treat them. They're lazy. They're no good. We get what we expect. We get what we deserve many times. Is it possible to be a good steward? It is possible to be a good steward of both the people and the company. I can remember one of the first leaders that I had as a young man. He said, Bill, never get close to your people. Now, this was back in the early 80s. Never get close to your people because they'll take advantage of you. Now, what kind of... It'd be like saying, Bill, don't get close to your wife and your children. They'll take advantage of you. And sometimes your children will take advantage of you, especially when they're 13, 14, and 15. I heard a good one the other day. You may have heard this before. The reward for being a parent and not killing your children when they're 13, 14, 15 is that one day they'll have grandchildren. And that's when it's fun. And I can tell you, it is more. Because you can spoil them and send them home, and it's just fantastic. In setting goals, objectives, and measuring for accountability. Servant leaders love lean because of the measurements. We need to be measuring lots of things that we don't measure in business other than profits. Because there's lots of things that make profits happen or don't make profits happen. So set up goals and objectives and make sure that people know them. Don't send them in an email. Say, here's your goals for the year. If you need me, call me. Meet with people. Talk with them. Ask them how they're going to, what they think about them. How are they going to make it happen? How can you help them make it happen? Bill, I got 40 people. Then you need to learn to delegate. Most leaders have never learned how to delegate. They're either afraid to delegate because somebody's going to fail and make them look bad, and sometimes they don't want to delegate because it might make that person look good, and people start getting attention. Delegation is probably one of the greatest things that a leader can learn. Number one, you're creating new leaders for the future. You're giving people a chance to show what they can do. You're showing people you trust them. You give them this big project, or at least you work with them in that project to begin with. And so it makes a difference in their life. You can go to the next one. Starting with a real honest look at your organization's leadership. These are the requirements, again, for how do you develop it. It is scary for me, thinking back to when I was a vice president, how dishonest we are sometimes when we have our meetings with each other, especially as leaders. We're looking for somebody to blame other than ourselves. Always be honest. If you want to start, what's your current culture? What is leadership like? And what are the people saying about leadership? You have to have a commitment by senior leadership for the journey. It's kind of like lean manufacturing. If there's no commitment, you're just wasting money. Because people will spot a counterfeit. I said it again. They will spot it again. Here we go again. They got a consultant in here, or they're doing it on their own, and we got a whole new program. This is the 5th one in 6 years, and none of them will work. They die because there's nobody to keep it going. Leaders who embrace servant leadership is the gold standard. I talked about that at the beginning. Whether you call it servant leadership, I like servant leadership because it creates the servant. Servants, they're wimpy. And I can go, no, servant leadership is the highest form of leadership because it's about the people you're leading. Call it principle-based. I had a president said, are you going to talk about God? I said, well, for me, my path of understanding servant leadership started in the church. And then as I had some good mentors and stuff and realized how selfish I was and it was all about me and my title and bragging to my buddies, the light started to come on. So for me in my path, if people ask me how I discovered servant leadership, I'm going to share that. And he goes, well, I don't want you trying to convert my people. I said, I'm not your pastor. I'm not coming in here. We're not going to sing Just As I Am at the time clock when people leave. So, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this. Leaders, so expectations, accountability, you've seen that on several slides. It is key. You have to hold not only your leaders, but your people accountable for holding you accountable. As a president, I used to say, how's the plant manager doing? And he would just cringe because he's standing there. And I knew some people were going to go, he's doing good, and that's not the real answer. Especially this plant in Georgia, we had a lot of issues. And I could write another book about what not to do, and a lot of those mistakes were my own. Learning to be a president. I'd never been one before. When you become a leader, you've never done it before. And so we need to hold your hand and help you and not throw you to the wolves. But expectation, accountability is key for yourself, for your leadership team, and for the people to hold you accountable for what you claim you're going to do. Sometimes as presidents, we go into a room like this and we do it by shift, and we are really going to start communicating. We love you people, and you're going to see a big difference. And I see the eyes rolling and all that stuff, and I go away and nothing changes. And they go, that's when they go, here we go again. Don't do anything. This will die in about 6 months. Don't worry about it. Ongoing servant leadership, training, teaching, coaching, and mentoring. Those companies that do some good teaching, training, sometimes they don't do the coaching and mentoring. Again, it's a time element. Who's going to do it? There's lunch. There are lots of, in my book I talk about 5 leadership styles. One of those is potential servant leaders. There are servant leaders working in every company. They may not know the name of it. They may not know that they're supposed to be doing it because nobody's told them, but every company has servant leaders. Every company has potential servant leaders. Every company has untitled servant leaders, people who don't have a title, and they're impacting people's lives because they've earned trust and they've cared about people, and people trust them. They'll go. Usually there's somebody that's older maybe. I've seen some young coaches and mentors that were kind of coaching and mentoring by accident, I call it. But coaching and mentoring they need somebody they can talk to that they can be honest with and not worry about it's going to go in their HR report. Leaders see teaching as a process, not a program. You all have heard this a million times before. If you call it a program, it'll die. This is our new program. It's a process. It never stops. It never ends, and then there's pain in the journey. I can't tell you how many times I failed in helping some people. My wife, bless her heart, sweet Atlanta girl, and she'll go, Bill, we've been together 35 years. She goes, it wasn't your fault. And I say, yeah, it was. And, she kind of calms me down, and she's a servant wife. And I don't mean that because she does all the housework. That's because she really shows me care all the time, which I don't deserve all the time. But you're going to have some pain in the journey. You're going to hurt some people. You're going to say, why are people not getting the message? What am I doing wrong? And one of the things about me, I always thought I could turn people around. One of the things you will do as a leader is you will promote people sometime that shouldn't have been promoted. Somebody talked you into promoting them. They've been with the company 20 years. They were great, and I'm just picking on maintenance managers. This isn't it's just because I remember doing this. We had our greatest maintenance person. There wasn't a machine they couldn't fix. They could listen to it and tell you what was wrong. He'd been with the company 20 years, and we wanted to pay him more money. And so HR is going, the only way you can pay more money is he has to get promoted. I changed that in our company. I thought it was stupid once I got to be president. And this was when I was executive vice president. We promoted him. He was excited. He had been taught that you have to have a title to impact people, make more money, and be able to brag to your buddies. After 3 months, it was a disaster. Because the reason he loved maintenance so much is he liked people, he just didn't want to have to deal with people problems. And when you become a supervisor or a leader, you're dealing with people problems. He was miserable, the people were miserable, and we lost our best maintenance person. Our machines were falling apart now because that wasn't his role. And so I put him back in, I met with him, I said, if you could make the money you're making now, would you rather be a supervisor or be a maintenance manager? I want to be a maintenance manager. I can deal with my man, my boys, he called them. And he fixed machines and everything got better. So be careful about people that you promote. Have a system that allows you to pay more for people who are doing a great job. They don't necessarily have to have a title, nor do they necessarily have to go to the next level in leadership. Go ahead. People always say, who are some well-known servant leadership companies? Are there really? Does this really exist, or are people just writing books? There's 4,700 books on Amazon on servant leadership. If I'd have known that, I wouldn't have written a book. No, I'm just kidding. Good Lord's Blessed, the book's number 10, or number 12 out of 4,700 books. But these are companies that are in all their literature. There's the Greenleaf Center, there's the Servant Leadership Institute in California. They're both nonprofits. They study all this stuff. And you don't think about, Olive Garden and Red Lobster are owned by the same company. They're part of a group. WD-40, I got to listen to that president, chairman, CEO. What an awesome man. He's from Australia. The story of how he turned that around. WD-40, everybody's got it in their garage. I thought it was just part of some company. It's a public company, WD-40. Their stock's done well. Their earnings are amazing. And he talked about how he turned that company around when he came. A lot of the principles that you saw me do. Southwest Airlines. What do we know about airlines? They go bankrupt about every 2 or 3 years. They rarely make money. They're the only business, I think the government keeps them going because how would we get from Wisconsin to California? It'd be a long drive. Sales calls would be insane. I'm leaving Monday to call on somebody Friday in California because I got to drive. Southwest Airlines has made money 39 straight years. They got the same airplanes. They use the same fuel. Some of the same processes. Some are different. I got to hear the lady that's head of their leadership development speak at this event I went to. Awesome lady. For every 5,000 opens, and they don't have, and she's talking about over a period of time because they have very few openings. They have 100,000 applicants. You want to have people stand in your parking lot? You become a servant leadership company and become a real one, and people will be wanting to come to work. You won't be worrying about lazy people because you'll have the pick of the litter when people show up, or at least you think you will, on paper. Herman Miller's in Michigan. They're a furniture company. Aflac, we all know Aflac. Nordstrom. But they have one thing, Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. We don't have many of them in Indiana. That's where I live now, Indiana. I'm trying to get back south. So we've gone from Wisconsin to Indiana. And fast food business. You have to be open 7 days a week or you can't make money. Chick-fil-A, 6 days a week. They're true to their values, their Christian heritage. People need to be with their family. They're not open on Sundays. They make lots of money. They do what people say you can't do. Two great examples I think are the best. Starbucks. Hey, if you charge $4 for 50 cents worth of coffee, you're going to make money. But they are. The training, all their philosophy, everything is built around servant leadership. And there's lots of servant leadership companies that are quiet, nobody knows. They might have 50 employees. And there's plenty of companies that are trying to accomplish that. Because I can tell you after a long career, servant leadership, I'd really discovered it probably in my mid to late 30s, and it really came alive in the 90s. And I think about what kind of leader I could have been if I'd have discovered it early. If I really had thought and learned that it was about the other people, not me. It's about the people I'd been called to lead. Because I can see faces of people I did a lousy job as a leader. And it haunts me sometimes. My wife goes, get it out of your head. All right, go to the next. This is just everybody's read the book Good to Great. 2005 study, Magellan Executive Resources took the top 11 companies that were talked about in Good to Great. They took the 11 companies off the slide you just saw, or the 11 top companies that were servant leadership companies. The good to great weren't servant leadership companies. They were just had a good record. Then if you'd owned the stock in Standard & Poor's 500 during that 10-year period, 95 to 2005, you'd had a 10.8% return pre-tax. If you'd have bought Jim Collins's companies, you would have had a 17.3% return. If you'd have bought stock in the servant leadership companies, you'd have had a 24.2% return. What that says is studies can mean anything. It just means that that servant leadership won't hurt your bottom line. It won't hurt your results. I can tell you from the companies I've worked for, it'll have a difference. So I got to finish up here. We won't go to any more slides. Does everybody have a copy of slides? Mm-hmm. So again, as I finish, I want you to know there's two paths for leadership. One is driven by power. The other one is driven by a desire to serve. I will tell you, my prayer for you as I look out at people a lot younger than me, that you will pick the one of service, because it will help you impact and change this country. Because you will start caring about other people than yourself. And if you care about other people, it sets up a barrier for you being selfish, because you're now focused on others and not yourself. I thank you. You've been a good crowd, and everybody have a good rest of the day. Thank you.